Hey guys, Jay at Lords of War, another solo video. Curses away this week. I'm sure my Patreon members will be like, or the people on the fence to sign up for a Patreon will be like, why would I only get half a channel? Of course, we'll be back next week, and then I think most of the rest of the year should be, you'll see both of us. So apologies for that. Yeah, today's video is on kind of like, we got to play some Spearhead, got to play some AOS match play, and it is kind of my opinions and thoughts on that. Obviously, I have a wall of AOS, so there will be some, you can stop right here, there will be a bit of bias. I do legitimately think the game is good, but it being one of my favorite games, there might be a bit of a side of like, no, it's good. Because I want it to be good. No, but it is. And so first thing I'll talk about is the Spearhead game, which was like highly touted, talked about often by the Games Workshop marketing team, and packaged in the Skaven box. Something that as time has gone on now, it really makes the value of that box good, because you do get the boards, the cards, you get armies, and you get that cool Fire and Jade book, which a lot of people ask me about. It has all the rosters in it in book form, and although everything in that book is downloadable for free, that book only comes in that box. So there's still, I think there's still a bunch of Skaven Tides out in the wild. But we've kind of whittled down to just a bit, one and a bit here. So, yeah, if you can get the book, great. If not, it's no sweat. You do also get War Scroll card data cards in the faction packs that were just released recently. Those are limited. Like, they're not going to print them forever. So if you can get a copy there, get it. They're really nice. They make playing the game easily. And it's just really well done, because it really does get you a way of playing these like small 500-ish point games of AOS almost instantly. You don't have to write a roster. It's pre-done for you. The only decisions you're making are, there's a card with like a trait, army trait, and then like artifacts and enhancements for one of your heroes that you can pick. And then there will be a little another little card with like another special, like whatever. Maybe some factions have special tables and things. They do extra rules for them. Excuse me, but the artifact and the enhancement that you pick, you get to pick after you see what your opponent's playing. So there's like a cool little. That's the only time you're like sitting there thinking for a couple minutes before the game starts to make that choice. Anyway, so then you're into this quick game. It plays on a small board. It has the objectives are already printed on the board, which I love. So there's no like measuring, setting that up. The deployment zones, there's two of them. They're very simple. There's like one where the board is just down the middle bisected, and you've got like my zone and your zone, just like games of 40k or OS sometimes have. And the other one, there's a diagonal, which is the same thing. It's just cut in half diagonally. And there's actually like imprinted lines on the board that delineate so that you don't even measure or screw that up, which is awesome. I like that a lot. So what you have is this like fun packaged game of AOS that is like that you can just roll out and play in 5 minutes. Start playing in 5 minutes. I think it's very powerful. When you want to get people into a product, you want to reduce, especially like a board. Let's call it a board game. Any board game or whatever. The first thing people think like, oh, I'm not going to be good at this, or there's too many rules. I want to have to spend so much time studying before I can play. There's a reason why video games have quick play features, so that you can just like, I don't know, install the game, maybe like configure your buttons how you like, and then you just hit quick play, and you're just instantly put into a game and you're playing. And that's I think the idea here, which I think is very clever. So the game itself is they found a way to like strip down or just remove it just enough of the extra game rules that you won't really you'll still get a good experience. You'll still get most of the rule set. Just removed a few things, small things, but the reason that's good is it gets you playing. But then once you play a few times, you can graduate or springboard to 1,000 points or match play, or 2,000 points of match play very easily. I've seen several customers make that migration without much issue, because they're like, oh, this is just like Spearhead, just, okay, I got a few extra things I can do, and then, if you play match play, yeah, your battle tactics will change slightly, because you have to pick them from a table rather than a card system. So that's the other thing about Spearhead. The centerpiece of Spearhead is the cards. So what happens is you like deploy your armies, there's a roll off, the guy wins I think the attacker gets picked turn order, and then you draw your cards. So you both draw 3 cards, and the cards have a top half and a bottom half. half. So the top half is your battle tactic, which will say, go stand in a circle, go hold this terrain feature, stand, go kill a thing on the destroy a unit on the opponent's side, whatever. And the bottom half will have a very powerful command ability. So command ability could be something like give a unit a ward save, or bring a unit back to the table, like a destroyed unit can come back, or there's ones that let you like retreat and heal guys, like recover slain models. So these are like often you're looking at the battle tactic and you're like, yeah, that's good, but this command ability might really save me later. So you have to make this decision about scoring points or playing a long game. Or sometimes you draw cards where you're like, okay, these objectives up top are like kind of hard right now, so I'm not going to do them. I've held on cards just for the command ability, because I thought like, well, if I lose the turn order, and they're going to be on top of me, I need something, a way to escape. So I had a game that worked out just like that. I had really clutch cards towards the end. I was behind in the game, and I was in some sticky spots, and I was able to use some of the command abilities to really get me out of those bad situations, and then I was able to score some tactics and just kind of pip a win at the end. So I thought that part of it is, so you played any Warhammer Underworlds, you'll feel at home in this game with the card mechanics, with the arena style of board. Obviously there's not hexagons, but that's okay. You still use units to you use chaff units to go and block areas, to get in the way. Because there's not a lot of units on both sides, it's very hard to wipe units out in one go, and it takes quite a bit of several rounds. So it's a well-crafted game, and I recommend you don't sleep on it. Definitely, if you're really always pining at the AOS models, I definitely say, grab a Spearhead or Vanguard or half a Skaven Tide, and find a buddy or go to your local store, and if they're running events, or try and get people to play events, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot. So with that said, I think it's a good product, and looking forward to seeing more events. And I think you're gonna see like Spearhead be like I could see an Adepticon having like 200-man Spearhead event or something. I think it's legitimately got enough in there. So just like Kill Team or whatever, it's good. So it's got a Kill Team, but with more units actually. So the next thing, match play. That's something a little closer to me, because I've always typically played match play. Basically, for the last, Chris is pretty similar to me. Like I do play 40k very occasionally, but generally, my gaming history for the last 15, 16 years has been like, a lot of Warhammer Old World or 8th edition, and then Age of Sigmar in a match play format, because that's what my close friend gaming group does, and we usually play on hard mode, or we try to. Doesn't mean we're great players. It just means we try and intend to play it on the, whatever you want to call it, the hardest, or the way it's meant to be played, I guess you could call it that. So that's fine. And so I had some, when before the rule set was released fully, you had these questions, and Chris and I did videos about like what we thought, how this would work or that would work. Is the game going to be too complicated? Is not. I'm going to say unequivocally now that no, I don't think it is. I think it is a little bit easier. I think they have made, and I think, and again, back to my Spearhead spiel, that it will that helps you transition into that mode. So a couple things if you look at the match play. So if you look at the scenarios, they give you a terrain layout, which I think is actually quite good, because there's a few levers they can pull there. So they, having the terrain layout I like, because then you and your opponent don't have to discuss that. You just look at the map, you take the terrain you have around you, you put it in those spots. They have specific rules like area terrain, or place of power, or just or overgrown, or whatever. They have like set things, which I think is good. So you can automatically know, hey, if I move my wizard next to this terrain, you can pre-plan this, or at your deployment, or whatever. And I think that is that's very cool. So I like that. It will mean though that if you're a TO or you play a lot of games, you may need more terrain. We played the Border War scenario the other day, and I think it had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. 4 small, 4 medium. So we had that lying around, and it was fine, and the board looked good, and I like that. I like that. Again, it's like, Spearhead is the mini version of this. So Spearhead has the same thing going, tells you what to do, and same here. So I like that. The next thing was in the hero phase. I'm just gonna tick things off as they come to my mind. They got it. You know, we in OS 3.0 we had that. They introduced that, like there was like a table of hero abilities that you both you and your opponent to pick. There was like, you know, finest hour where your guy could, you know, be really buffed for that one round. There was I think you could generate a command point. You can make a guy a wizard. You could heal a hero. So that table's gone. So this is one of those funny things that I never really, not that I had a problem with it, but now that it's gone, I don't really miss it. And I think it's because it's just one less thing to remember. So, and because me and my opponent aren't doing it, it's even more like you really just move on with your life. Now there's still plenty of things to do in a hero phase, but I like that is basically what happens is if you're the active player, you do all your hero phase things, and then your opponent does theirs. So I think that's kind of good. And there's some funny little things like you can and you both just get 4 command points. And if you're the underdog, so in further battle rounds, if you're behind, you get an extra command point, which I think is pretty solid and easy to remember as well. So you can do things like you can cast a spell in your opponent's turn. So your opponent finishes their hero phase stuff, and then you could spend a CP and throw a spell out. So you can throw an endless spell out or something like that. Or buff a unit. So I thought that was, but there's like I think a -1 to cast. So I think that's kind of cool. So they've sprinkled in these like little counter abilities in the different phases. There's a covering fire where you get to shoot in your opponent's turn. So you feel like you're engaged, and there's like little abilities you can do. Anyway, the phases are very clean. Hero phase, similar things. You're still casting spells. You're still turning on abilities. It'll tell you when and how. A lot of the stuff, it doesn't require command points either, which I like. So there's your command points, you are using them, but there's less overall. There's a much fewer commands to memorize. I guess there's only like a dozen ones in the rulebook, and if you go to the back of the handbook, they're all listed and when they use them, and it's kind of like 40k. There's only a handful of them, and you use. They use several of them often, and so then it's basically you're not trying to keep track of those and your army ones, and there's like not a lot of abilities or ways to get extra command points. So most of what happens is just printed on your unit cards. So the other big change, there's no arcane bolt or mystic shield in the game, as far as I can tell. So that's kind of big. So again, there's what you'll find is if you want to assess units and what they do in the game, it's like basically what's printed on their card. And there's some synergies with neighboring units, but you aren't relying on so many buff stacking from the universal command. But yeah, there's all out attack, there's all out defense still in the game. But there isn't, the Mystic Shield, there isn't, Inspiring Presence is gone because there's no Battle Shocks. There's another thing that you think you would miss and then you don't. You're like, oh. Okay, so I actually really I was mentioning in previous videos how I was hoping objective control or control scores would come into the game, and I think it's great. It was very easy to add up totals on objectives in games, and yeah, the battle shock I really didn't miss because most of the time units were just inspiring presence anyway. So, and now that frees up a command point to be used for something more fun, to be honest, because you always save a CP just to like keep units from exploding, and now you can just be like, no, I can spend it on, whatever extra, a counter charge or an extra shot, or there's one called, I haven't really got to harness it, but there was one intriguing one called power through. Certain circumstances, units can push through the enemies that they're fighting that get to the other side to make room and to maybe leap into the backfield. Like that's kind of cool. So yeah, so because there's like less buff stacking in general, you're relying more on what's on the war scroll card. You can kind of also study your opponent's cards or ask them and then have a good idea. Often you can be like, oh, what do your guys do? And they'll be like, oh, they hit on 4s and they win on 3s and they rent this, and you're like, okay. And in previous editions of AOS, that was like useful knowledge, but you're also like, yeah, but how many other things can you add on top? And that would change the unit, because then you'd ask that question and they'd be like, yeah, it's 4s and 3s and da-da-da. And then when you went to like engage them or something would happen, then your opponent would be like, okay, they have this, this, and this now because I spend this CP and this guy's standing here, and then all of a sudden the unit's just like 2s and 2s and run 2, damage 3 for some reason. Like the stacking would happen quickly. There's still a little bit of it, but they've toned it down. So I like that. I like that it's what you would call it. Things are a little more face value in the game. And there was another point I wanted to make. So then the scoring has also I don't want to say increased. Basically, battle tactics are with 4 now, and the primaries vary on the scenario, um, but usually they're worth a little bit more. So they've kind of increased the margins, I guess. So it used to be in previous OS was like primaries are worth 1 each usually, and then this battle tactic was 2, so it was like usually got 5 or 6 points a turn. And so if you went up or down by a point or two, it was actually a big deal. It was like hard to catch up because like there weren't a lot of ways to gain lots of points quickly. Whereas here, if you manage to shut down your opponent some way, let's say you're behind in the game and you manage to like stifle them in a way where they don't score a lot of points, you can then easily score 6 or 8 or 9 points and catch up. You could argue it also means they could potentially run away quicker, but I think the making, instead of a game being like, typical scores in previous games would be like 20 to 19 or something. I think you're gonna see more like if games go the distance, you can see more like 40 to 30 something. Like, I actually think there's probably a mathematical chart that shows that this way does allow for a little bit more catch up. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. But and the reason that you can catch up, there's another factor that lets you catch up more, and that is the big. This is kind of another centerpiece rule change, which was if you are if you want to roll, if you go in the turn order, a battle round ends, you roll off, and if you won the roll and you opt for the double turn, so you had the back half of the last turn, you won the priority roll, and then you chose to go first this next turn. The penalty now is you do not get to score a battle tactic. So now you've taken 4 points out of your scoring pool. The advantage is supposed to be that now you get to go again and feast on your opponent's army one more time. And seeing it in action, I think it's good. I think it's also in Spearhead actually, and I think it is a really good way to balance that, and also does create for some catch up, because if it flubs, your opponent will get a pretty solid chance to recoup a lot of points on you. Witnessing it in a few games now, I think it's a good rule. I think it's solid. Now they did add a provision, so if your opponent wins the roll and forces you to go twice in a row, you don't get that penalty of the battle tactic thing. It's only if you win the roll and then you choose. So you can't like trap card your opponent, which I think is fair. And the last little bit of the new game that I will talk about that I like is the endless spells. Massive change. They're free, so you don't pay points. They're just clumped into like little packages or ores, and then you just before the game pick your lore. I'll add another little side note. Whatever spells your army knows, all your wizards know, which I also love. So I didn't have to spend any time being like, who has what. All I had to keep track of was how many casts or prayers I had, and then I would just roll the casts or the prayers, and then pick the abilities, which is awesome. But anyway, the endless spells, they are, you'll notice on their cards, there's like several things. Some of them, like the Purple Sun, for instance, can do. They're like a creature that's moving around. It's got like a lot of them have like, I think they have like health and attacks and wounds. But some of them like the Purple Sun can charge and fight things, which is kind of cool. You'll notice though you have to get used to the fact that when you set them up though, they don't move, as I believe, because they can't use any abilities when the setup doesn't. You can't do another. The setup is like generally something when you do it, you don't get to move again, so that's important. And a charge is quantified as a move ability. So when you set them up, they're just there. But subsequent turns, so there's a bit of setup. In subsequent turns, though, they're like moving around. They do their move and pass over models and do a bunch of negative things to them, or positive, whatever. Do debuff or buff, and then they can like charge and fight. And you need to go if you need to pick an endless spell. Probably that you should have in your collection is probably the Purple Sun now, because it is. It -1 saves models that it's nearby in combat range, I believe, which is just very strong right now because there's no Mystic Shield. If it passes over guys, it does like mortal wounds, and it attacks pretty well. Oh, also you can't just easily if you dispel it, if you try and banish it, or it just takes damage. That's just one of them. There's other ones that have all kinds of abilities, like swords. Quicksilver swords do ignore ward saves, so they're like a scalpel for taking care of certain tough enemies and heroes. Anyway, you should definitely. They're all in now. The one thing about this though is Games Workshop has put them all in the handbook. So you need the General's Handbook if you want to play with endless spells. And I guess their logic was like, well, if you're only playing casually, or if you're just playing Spearhead, or if you're not into like the full match play experience, you don't need to. It's like a need to know basis. But anyway, they're all in the 2025 handbook. I would recommend getting the handbook anyway because it's a wonderful book. It has everything's laid out perfectly. This is like the 5th or 6th generation of this concept of this General's Handbook, and it is like there is nothing in there that isn't useful. It is an extremely useful book. It has everything quick referenced, has all the different things you need. Everything's laid out perfectly, and there's no bloat in it, which is pretty good. I'll actually see. I keep thinking of things, and the last little bit is just like a generic recap of what AOS is like right now. For this season in the handbook, they have added. There's like you basically have like hero. Your hero. You basically have you can nominate a unit to be like a bodyguard for your general or your hero, and so that happens just like you just pick before the game starts. You're like, oh, they're gonna be with them, and then there's like a once per game thing they can do. They can be really defensive or offensive kind of thing. It's like they can get extra attacks if they're. It's like if you pick the bodyguard, there's like a specific one. If your hero, if your general and them are like standing together and they get charged, you can reduce your opponent's attack, so they have one less attack die per guy. It's like if they form a shield wall or something. It's like it's kind of cool. I like it because unlike previous seasons, it doesn't warp your army list crafting. We had Galatian veterans or whatever. Then that was the season of the infantry guys. You like literally built your army around that. I need these types of units. And then before that was like the monster edition. So you need again early 3.0 was like, okay, I guess if you don't take monsters, so I like that this is like a little more choose your own adventure, and then also there's the speaking of list writing, it's like 40k now. It's very choose your own adventure too. You don't need battle line units. The only thing that's like locked away is your heroes. You have to pick whatever hero when you pick a hero, it'll tell you what units can go with them in their regiment. So certain heroes will unlock certain units. It's not super like convoluted. Like you'll still get to take the toys that you want. But what it does mean is you can do funny things like fill your army with just certain if you have a I don't know, I'm trying to think of like if you wanted to just take croc scores or something, you could do that. It's not really that limiting. You fill your points with whatever you want. I could just take cannons and lose my game very quickly. Things like that. So long story short, AOS 4.0 is cleaner from a decision point of view. I think once you play 2-3 games, you'll be quite proficient at it. I like it a lot. I think it's gonna be a great addition. See what happens to battle tomes when some armies get fleshed out, but I don't think they need to do a lot, to be honest. And I'm a cities player, and there's a lot of war scrolls, and I'm like, ugh, not very exciting. And I've seen a few people go through their war scrolls and be like, I think what they'll do is you'll see some unit tweaks to some of their hits and wound rolls and a few things, just like and points and adjustments. There's gonna be like they're gonna pull in a few levers there, maybe give you a few more enhancements and like a few things like that. But I don't think they need to do a lot. I don't think they need to really create really change it up that much. I think you're gonna see, and I think we saw this in 10th at 40k where the battle tomes are kind of the index cards with a few fixes and tweaks. So anyway, give the game a go, enjoy it, play some events, play some Spearhead, and if you've played, let me know, put some comments, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.